Hello and welcome to another edition of the Lockton Marine Podcast. Today, I am honored to be speaking to John Wiik, for decades one of the most recognizable figures in marine insurance, most prominently as the CEO of Norwegian Hull Club for 32 years. Thank you for joining us, John.
Thank you.
I am very excited about this episode, as I believe you are uniquely positioned to comment on the state of marine insurance and how we got to where we are today. But before that, I would like to ask you to take us back to the beginning. How did you find your way into this industry?
Well, I can briefly comment on that. I was actually graduated from the University of Wisconsin as an MBA in 1975. I had 2 children. I needed a job. I came to Bergen, and it happened that Hans-Peter Hansen offered me a job as insurance broker in his newly established company. And at that stage, Hans-Peter was one of the most innovative Norwegian brokers that, in fact, managed to commercialize Norwegian insurance into the Greek market through a period in which London was getting very much call it less dynamic in many ways. It was ruled by cartels type agreements, which was the case in Norway as well.
Mm.
There was a geographical cartel, east versus west and south. But also in terms of who the players in Norway should do what. So when I started in 1979 with then the Bergen Hull Club, offered to be a CEO and took over in 1984. Then our role was basically to be the claims leader. So the market agreement was, don't touch the rating part of the equation. Do the claims job, which was developed into a very skillful, call it, method of settling claims, etc. So that was basically the beginning.
Great. And so from the beginning, which was then a fairly provincial industry, you described that Norwegian brokers were moving into Greece and they sort of dragged the market along with them.
Correct.
To where you left the club in 2016 as like one of the larger, more meaningful players on the world scene. Was that a vision that you had very early on, or did it develop over time?
It developed over time because the beginning it was that in 1979 we had a tanker crisis. Norwegian shipping was split into basically south, east and west. And the west part, which was our Bergen Hull Club market, now we get back to the cartel, we saw big tanker owners, Hilmar Rexton, one of them, just fading away. So the whole basis for existence more or less disappeared. And in order to compensate for that, we had to do something. And we only knew Hull insurance. We didn't know anything about loss of hire and all these special, very interesting niches within marine. So what we knew a lot about was Hull, and in particular claim side. So we were 100% Bergen, and that's it. And early on I saw we can't survive, and not to talk about grow, if we limit ourselves to the little Bergen Western, call it, market. So I started fiddling around with how do you expand a business like that? And the first thing I thought about was, of course, Oslo, which we managed slowly to get into. But to get into a scale which was meaningful, little Norway even, is not enough. You really need to go international. And that vision came very early. I wanted to become a player in the international market.
Was this in any way controversial at the time? I remember, and this is, obviously recent history, in 2006, you were quoted in the paper as saying that we don't need Norwegian owners. And I also remember the paper had to retract that because you were misquoted.
Yeah, that is correct. And obviously the mutual club is a mutuality also in terms of value sharing. So a Bergenese owner didn't necessarily like that we should expand into Greece. As long as that we recognize that the quality of Greek shipping is fantastic, absolutely comparable and sometimes even better than what we saw in Norway. Why shouldn't we expand into the Greek market or the Italian market or whatever market. But it was met with some resistance. There's no growth without pain, and that was part of it. We lost certain people back home, but the main thing was that we grew from a 10-employee, 30 million krona turnover into 150 and a couple of $100 million in premium. But the big thing that changed a lot of this was that we recognized that in order to grow, you cannot grow along the hull-only path because the profitability, as you know, is marginal, if at all. So the big trend was the international expansion in combination with product diversification. And the benefit we had was that we had an excellent claims handling competence. We had an academic supply chain through Wilmot, through Stanlund, through the Nordic Institute of Marine Law, the academic side of it, which was very valuable in terms of developing the plan and in terms of expanding into other products. We had intellectual power to generate and create new forms of insurance.
And to pick you up on that, so the fact that you had the Nordic plan, or the Norwegian plan as it was at the time, how important is that to have not only your own product in terms of claims handling and capital, but that you had a market, something identifiable that set you apart from the international competition?
It was incredibly important because we grew out of, call it, the consumer side, not the capital side. So our clients' needs are taken in, considered, and is kind of measuring what is commercially and from reinsurance point of view sensible, and at the same time, how reliable will this be when supplying our owners with something? Don't forget we are a mutual, by definition, owned and controlled by ship owners, so we have to balance this in a nice way. And then having the plan, developing that plan, it's like saying the technology that we applied was excellent. We had people who really knew what they were talking about legally. So to me, at least, that was crucial that we had that. It gave us pride. We had our own platform, which was dynamic, which we could kind of derive from and compose new products. So it's like getting to the heart of it, that intellectual power and the academic supply or brain trust into something like that is vital.
Could I go back to something else? You spoke about the growth of the Norwegian Hull Club through your tenure, and not only in terms of the scope of business, the number of clients, the volume of premium, but also the people working for you. So you start out with 10 people and you have a very strong culture in-house. How do you maintain that through 32 years? Because I think out of those 10 people, I think all of them retired at the club, didn't they?
They did.
So how do you maintain that through a growth spurt of that size?
First of all, if you grow from 10 to 150 or whatever, the challenge you are up against as a manager will inevitably change similarly. But I think, if I may, in a modest way, say it requires an enormous amount of involvement and maybe some degree of leadership, and not the least, enormous hard work and a lot of traveling. And I think it boils down to you need strong leadership, and you need a very close attention to clients' needs and an open cultural attitude as well. You need to be, I'm half English, half Norwegian. That's not a bad thing. You need to be open to the world. There is more than Bergen or Norway, definitely.
So in exercising that leadership throughout your career, can you identify your biggest challenge?
The biggest challenge is to recruit and retain talent. This is a software industry. It's an intangible thing we sell. It's a creative thing. And the software, the humans, that element is what makes a good company. And that to recruit and retain, to make it interesting for the best to join was a big, big challenge.
Mm.
In particular, when you have to travel 150 days a year.
Sure. I suppose that wasn't made easier by only having a very small market to recruit from. So you're running a global business, you're trying to be relevant for Asian ship owners and American ship owners or energy companies. And your pool of talent is in a town of 300,000 people, or, well, we might throw Oslo into the mix as well.
I think we should. It's a good point. My comment would be that Norwegian shipping still today has a lot of prestige in a local community like Bergen. And anything that derives from shipping similarly has some attention, like insurance, like banking. And if you take the best of people who aspire to get into some of these industries, the pool of talent isn't that limited. In the London market, I'm not sure that you necessarily get the best of talents today. Maybe 100 years ago you did. But shipping in the UK was gone after the Second World War, basically.
So looking at where we are now as an industry and back to 79,
Yeah.
what do you see as the largest changes? What's the major difference between where we are now and where we started out?
I think the biggest difference is that we've grown from totally locally, from cartelized, whatever you call it, into a very open industry, which have access to the biggest reinsurers in the world. We retain business. We know how to generate profitable business. But I think, like in any industry, like we have discussed earlier, the real need for good leadership, good talented leadership, innovative leadership, we need that to propel the industry here to the next stage.
You started out as a broker. I'm not sure everyone knew that, but that also gives you some insight into the broker's role and how that has evolved over time. Do you see brokers as something different today than what they were when you were one yourself?
Yeah, definitely. If I may first comment on the first question you raised, I think that to have a broker background as an underwriter is not a bad thing. You look at it from a client point of view. And if that client point of view coincides with a market's expansion into the international market, to know how you internationally trade was certainly beneficial to somebody who was solely focused on a local community. So that dimension of openness into the market, into the Greek market in particular, was very, very useful, very, very useful. So I think that dimension, the salesmanship, I call it that, the salesmanship part of it, is definitely also a very important element if you want to grow an industry and grow a company like we did. We participated in growing an industry. So the second question you asked was on that.
How is it different? How is a broker's role different in 2024 compared to what it was in the late 70s?
The difference is that one of the differences certainly is that in 79, the brokers were basically, call it, channeled into one or two players in the market. Today you have the world. It was maybe not as analytical. Maybe we didn't have the same intellectual power in the industry like we have today, the broking industry. The difference is that we have become, the broking industry here, from very local to totally international and much more analytical and maybe professional in so many ways. So it's equal to any broking industry, but not of the same size as in London, of course.
Do you have, looking back, any regrets? Anything you wish you wouldn't have done, or anything you wish you would have done differently?
I think I have to say that I think in general, I looking back, I've had a fantastic journey, quite frankly. I've been privileged to grow along lines that I felt very comfortable with. And to have access to the global market and coming back to this tiny little town, that gave me peace with the family. I couldn't have done that in London. So I've lived my life, I think, more or less like I would have liked to live my life.
That's fantastic. Can't argue with that.
Thank you.
I was wondering if you could think of offering any advice to someone who's thinking about joining marine insurance, or someone who's just starting out in a career in marine insurance. Obviously, not everyone's going to be the CEO of a major insurer, but there's a lot of good careers out there for people who want them or has the ability to chase them.
Good question again. Number one, I think to work within the industry we are talking about, marine insurance, in this market, it is a very interesting and international industry. I would invite in just about anybody. Come along. It has a lot of opportunities. I think myself that I would have liked to recommend 2 dimensions. First of all, I think there is a lot of money created in retaining risk. There is a lot of money made in transacting. But to know both sides of the equation is quite valuable. How do you accumulate capital? But how do you facilitate business? I mean, you should know both. And then, as on the underwriting side, I think if you want to go into it, I would definitely spend some time on claims. The ultimate product that you supply, whatever you say, it's basic. You supply the service when the shit hits the fan. It's the claim. How to react, how to handle, how to prevent. That is probably a very useful tool, a very useful knowledge. If you go into underwriting, if you continue with the claim side, but in my opinion, the essence, the ultimate core is the claims. I'm so impressed when I see what can be done there. And then as a Norwegian, with the claims capacity and the number of clients we have, you will generate competence that is world class. And to have that inside your pocket, whatever you do later, is, in my opinion, key. And you are much more convincing when meeting a client, when you know what you talk about when it comes to claims. Because that's what he ultimately buys. He buys your knowledge there, and he or she buys your competence about preventing it. Premium side, rating side, fine. They will trade it off in any way they can. But at the core of it is the service you offer on handling claims and preventing the claims, in my opinion.
Are there any claims that you still wake up in the middle of the night and go, oh?
Yeah. I would say Rockness is something I'm never going to get out of, because it was so close to Birmingham, as you know, and with such a number of people that lost their lives. It is still something that emotionally wakes me up sometimes. I think, my God, what happened there? I think we handled it as well as we could, but the emotions surrounding it during the whole process, both in terms of relationship with the client and then handling it later as a PA claim, organizing it, etc., was enormous.
Something it seems to be more or less consistently discussed in the last decade is the threat of all the opportunities related to digital transformation technology. Do you see the business being under threat from AI or?
Yeah, definitely. I don't know to what extent, but as we also have discussed, we've been through certain, not call it revolutions, but stages when technology changed. And we went from, as you know very well, telefax into PCs, and I think we in the Norwegian Hunt Club, we kind of appreciate that very early on. And that you need to be on top of that technologically and analytically, the actuarial side. You need to get the best people there so that you can document it. Because the ultimate capital providers, being maybe the reinsurers in our case, they are quite skillful, and they and we had to talk the same language, and it's a number game to a large extent. And then technology becomes at the forefront again.
So if I understand you, your suggestion or position would be to embrace the technology rather than fearing it and pushing it away.
It would be totally naive to think that you cannot benefit from it. Totally naive. But how? I cannot give you that answer.
No, I don't think
but it's just
anyone can.
I don't think so either. But it should be embraced rather than threatening us, definitely. But many things have threatened us. But those who get on board and make use of it from an early stage, recognize that the upside of it might benefit.
Yeah.
I would think so.
I think you're right. I have this thought experiment sometimes when you go to an industry event or a big dinner or something, and you look out across the floor and there's 500 people there, and you try to think, well, will all of this be gone in 2 years or 3 years just because, a computer can replace some of what we do? I don't think so. But I do think that the leading the conversation into how can we adopt it efficiently? And also, what are the things that can never be replaced by a computer? And you've already mentioned claims. So claims, advisory service, product development, crisis response and emergency handling.
Absolutely.
You're never going to do that with artificial intelligence. You need real people.
You do. And one of the obvious reasons is that there is no claim which is identical. So the variables change all the time. But you could certainly draw general conclusion from parts of it. But to be sort of a naive and believe that, you can put that into a computer and you'll get the answer how to react, that's totally naive, I think. Because the parameters will change from case to case all the time. And then, of course, there will be changes in the call it technology on what we insure, which adds a new dimension to it. So whatever you thought you could use as your basis for predicting, that basis technologically is different in 5 years, obviously.
Which is both a challenge and an opportunity. It's a challenge if you choose to be passive and let it just wash over you, but it's a huge opportunity if you get in front of it.
That's it. And that's the whole basic attitude what I think you need to take on. Be proactive, embrace it, and see how you can use it. I know from a local insurance company that they have taken it on board as a KI, call it manager, and they really embraced it. But non-marine is probably easier in the private market than marine. But don't believe that we are so different from anybody else within the insurance sector that we can't take something out and learn. But I repeat myself, I don't know how. I'm not really an IT man at all.
No, I think that insight is valuable, and the industry expertise and experience is what needs to be the driver behind any sort of technical revenue.
Yeah. And Anders, just face it, the banking and insurance industries as such probably have attracted a lot of people who like stability, predictability, long service, which is kind of contrary to being innovative, to be restless and moving. I'm more the last. I'm a more restless individual and like to see changes and like to see moving ahead. So you meet, certainly in the old traditional sense of banking and insurance, that is also change. The need to, it's necessary simply to survive. You need to change as the world becomes less and less stable, less and less predictable. Go with it. Don't fight it. Okay.
Finally, I would like to ask you about your life outside of insurance, because you've always been a very nuanced character. You had very strong and clear business persona, but on the outside, you had a very strong cultural interest, music, art. How has that helped you?
To me, that is where, if you can say that we as humans we are also spiritual people, meaning that we are not only focused on the numbers and the trades, but that we have a kind of things in life that makes us just live where we are and just get into something which gives peace and inspiration. And to me, music is there, but also visual arts. So I've found, we call it the spiritual part of myself. I've used more time now than ever. Also, basically, I'm the deputy chairman of Bergen National Opera. I'm helping the local community with a new project, big for performing arts here now. I was on the board of the Oslo Philharmonic. I like to use my little spiritual part to embrace what I think is very important in my life, being that spiritual little element. I don't want to kill it. I want to keep it alive. It makes me a more complete human being. I'm a more balanced when I can get access to that.
Is there an art to marine underwriting as well?
Yeah, there is that. There is definitely that. And that's where creativity comes from. I think creativity and to embrace the spiritual part, that goes along. There is something of a opportunity for the two to work together. Creativity stems from something, and art can give you some input into that. Get out of the cage.
Great. Thank you. Were you aware that, because I'm in preparing for this and I wanted to get all of the years and parts of your CV right, so I Googled John Wiik, and there's a Wikipedia page for John Wiik, and I was sure it was for you, but it's for an American politician, a senator from South Dakota. I don't know if you...
Hope he's a good guy.
Well, yeah, so do I. But I do hope that someone takes the responsibility and gives you a proper Wikipedia entry, because I think you might be more deserving.
Thank you. Nice of you. Very interesting conversation, Andersen. Thank you.
Thank you. And thank you for taking the time.
My pleasure.
And we look forward to welcoming you all again on the Lockton Marine Podcast.